Any reason why you think that the millennials love history things?
I think it's because there's a growing realization that even the 90s is now part of history.
Yeah,
People like to
this is
think that
strange.
people like to think the history kind of like stopped sometime in the 70s and 80s, but it's no longer the case. The 90s is almost 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Or like the cake shop, if they just sold off their business, is that fine? And then you begin to wonder, is the value, maybe the landmark value of that shop, Tambi magazine shop in that corner, or or is it the actual business?
Because I feel like buildings, right, it's like if the natural course of, like, let's say if New Baru becomes a hit place, which I think that's what the developers are trying to make it to be, right? And if young people actually go, then great. But I feel like if because of bad marketing, or like, the vendors are not really attractive, then people don't actually go, then it's just a natural thing whether people want to visit or not.
Hi, welcome to another episode of The Usual Place. You're with me, Natasha. I'm your host today, and I want to talk about saying goodbye to old buildings, spaces, and businesses as we know them, and saying hello to their new iterations. Now, in 2023, we said goodbye to an architectural icon, the Golden Mile Complex. Earlier this year, the 47-year-old Peace Centre closed down for demolition. And then we just had the opening of New Baru in the former Nanjiao High School, and will actually open in September later this year. But it started getting in new businesses that are familiar to Singaporeans. And I could go on, but first, let me introduce my guests on the couch today. First up, I have Dave. And would it be right for me to say you're a history buff? Because you have a History Yogi podcast and you also run a TikTok channel with the same name. And it's talking about Singapore's heritage, right?
Yep.
Okay. We'll get back to you in a while. Next to you on the couch is Khair.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Hello.
you run a video production company, but for your final year project at university, you captured the last moments of Golden Mile Complex in photos.
Yes, that's right.
And next to you, we have John, who previously worked at the URA Conservation Department, where you manage outreach and education efforts.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Welcome, guys, to the couch. We have a lot to get through. I wanted to go back to the places that I mentioned earlier, in particular, Golden Mile Complex and Peace Centre. And what stood out to me about these places was, because they just closed in the last couple of years, right? Was that what stood out to me was that younger people were finding a connection with these very old buildings, and in their own way, they've breathed new life into these old buildings right before they closed, and they've cast a spotlight on the history and the spaces, right? So agree or disagree, do young people tend to flock to places where there's a cool element to it, like a speakeasy, there's thrift stores, there's hip brands, or even a party? What do you guys think, and why?
Okay.
Here, I think this is a question for you.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess, when I was doing a project on Golden Mile, that's exactly what I noticed. I think over the years, Golden Mile has evolved into something that's creative. I think there was a burgeoning creative scene, and creatives that were actually setting up shop at Golden Mile. So I think it made it cool for young people to visit the building, and they otherwise wouldn't have, if that's what you're getting at, right? That they wouldn't have patronized the building if not for the element of coolness and stuff.
Yeah, and I think it fascinates me because both Peace Centre and Golden Mile Complex have been standing for very long. Yeah. And when you go to either of these places, so Peace Centre to me is kind of like a bit of a dumpy place before the last 6 months of its life. And people who go there know are there for a reason. Like you go for the music school, or you go there for like to print stuff, or there was like some KTVs, I think. So you had a purpose to go there. And then with Golden Mile, you go there because you want to eat Thai food, but people have a reason to go there. But then when they started saying that it was going en bloc, it was going to close, and then suddenly it became like, oh, we go there to have drinks, or we go there to like spray graffiti, and like it's like, oh wait, when did these two places become fashionable in that sense? So I was trying to understand what draws young people to these spaces right when they're coming down. Yeah. John?
I was thinking it's also about maybe something a little bit more practical. Like when the building is closing down, perhaps it just presents an opportunity to of a relaxation of the rules, like leasing issues, tenancy issues, and this provides maybe a no man's land almost, and allows for Creative Hub to come in and activate the space where it couldn't previously. I think it's quite evident in certain buildings like Peace Centre when the art community really rallied behind it and became quite a conversion point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this fascination with places like that are going to perhaps be closed down and all that, it's not a new thing, because if we just go back about 14 years ago, when the former Tanjung Pagar railway station was slated to shut down and be handed over to Singapore, we saw this same phenomenon. People flocked to the station in its last days to take pictures of every inch of the building. People wanted to explore. Some folks brought their children over there to say, this is how trains, the last running train is in the traditional sense, and so this desire to catch a final glimpse of history before it fades off is something that multiple generations have a desire to engage in. So we're just seeing it now on social media more prominently, and in this case, like on TikTok and other platforms. So I wouldn't say it's a very new thing, but it's just taken on a slightly different form as it evolves with each generation.
So then I would have to ask, does it detract from the history of the place, of what it was supposed to be? And when you now have, parties in it, or you have certain things that are more newish in it, do you think that takes away from the history of it, in a sense?
So like gentrification.
The gentrification of it.
Yeah.
Like, you did your project on it. What was your thoughts about it?
I think it is first of all, I think going to the history of the building itself, I think it was built as a part of a communal space, right? Where people can live, play and work, that sort of thing. Because at the top of Golden Mile, you have like residential units and stuff. So I think with the tail end of Golden Mile's life being like with parties and a bit more gentrified stuff, I feel it's a testament to how a space can grow and evolve with the times, actually. And actually, I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with it. In fact, if we were to look at things more positively, it could be a reason or a catalyst that allows people to find out more about the history and the functions of the brutalist architecture, which actually was one of the things that I think we use the word brutalist architecture and like mention the design all the time, but we never really explored how or it affected the community there, or like what the function of it was. So I think honestly, if you go to the building itself, you can experience it firsthand. So I guess having all these gentrified elements allows like an opening for people to come and visit.
So you're saying it's a bit easier to appreciate things rather than coming from it from an architectural point of view.
Yeah, you won't. People aren't,
gentrification isn't always a bad word.
Yeah, it's a bit of a dirty word, but
because it's a bit like, how do you revitalize a space, right? You kind of need the people, you need the money to activate spaces, and sometimes what you need is a hip cafe to get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
I mean, if we talk about a lot of our heritage areas in Singapore, a lot of it is because of something hip that came in, like Haji Lane.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time, I don't know if you recall, because, Haji Lane was actually quiet. And right now you can't go there without like having to squeeze past people.
Yeah.
But there was a time there were not many shops there, and then I think it was Comme des Garçons that started a pop-up there. And then like from there it just snowballed. Yeah. So you do need something to activate it, and then maybe you can see something better. But I think just to be clear also, like Golden Mile is not going anywhere, right?
It's not, we should make that clear.
It's conserved, and people perhaps celebrating the community that used to live there.
Yes.
That came to love and use the space.
Yeah.
But I think we will, having celebrated that, we're also moving on and looking forward to what the next iteration can be.
Yeah.
But my take on that is that I guess the building without its people is without soul. So the building is just a shell.
But then the question is, who are the people? And in this
Yeah.
case, for Golden Mile, I mean, are we saying that it is the Thai people? Or, is it, was it supposed to be more like what the architect intended, So I think there's certain questions there about who uses the space and who it's meant for.
Well, there's the architect's vision, there's the original idea of what the building's purpose is supposed to be, but then there's also the lived experience, like how the society and how people engage with the building. I mean, one of the examples that I can cite is that the Duxton Road area, like now it's a conserved shophouse stretch. But one of the in the 1980s, it was a really rundown residential neighborhood, that was on the verge of demolition. But and one of the TikToks that I had posted was a view of Duxton in the early 80s. So when people were just about to move out and they were about to redevelop the area, and you can see that at that point of time, it was a residential area. It was a home for many families. Now it's not like that. It's a more gentrified area with more, like restaurants, cafes, bookshops, things like that. Has something been lost? Yes. The original purpose of the district has changed, but if you look enough, you look carefully at the area, some aspect of the history still remains if you're willing to look more closely at it. The building itself survives. The purpose has changed, but you can still document, you can still learn and read the history of that area. And the fact that it still remains, despite all the decades that have passed since then, still shows that some aspect of our past survives, even if repurposed. Yeah, so sometimes I guess it's more of like a negotiation. How much do we preserve history versus ensuring that it survives in the future? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So here, you're the youngest one on the couch. And
Yes, I'm 16 by the way.
I mean, we won't give away all our ages, but I wanted to ask. I actually don't know why I singled you out, but I was like, okay, youngest one on the couch, because I wanted to ask, how does engaging with old spaces, heritage buildings, conserved spaces, and even heritage businesses actually contribute to lived experiences of young Singaporeans who may not have grown up? You might have been too young to like actually experience it, right? So someone who's like say 16 and then experiencing Golden Mile
Yeah, I'm
complex
26,
when it's
26.
like 6 months out from being redeveloped, right?
yeah.
Or Peace Center like 6 months before it gets demolished.
Yeah.
How does that contribute to your lived experience? Because this is not something that you grew up with.
Yeah. Actually, I did visit the building when I was younger, but not. I didn't frequent the building, but I had experiences with it.
But did you have any connection with it?
No.
Like, is it, yeah.
But I don't know how it would affect my like lived experience. But I feel like being there, there was a sense of preemptive nostalgia. It's like
Could
looking.
you explain that? What do you,
Yeah,
preemptive
it's
nostalgia?
like it's like when I'm looking at. Sometimes I catch myself just observing people. Because as a photographer, you're like looking for moments and people to feature. So it's like and then it will hit me sometimes that like all this would not exist in a few months. Everyone would pack their bags, move out and stuff like that. And there's this, with anything that goes lah. I think not just Golden Mile, it's just this idea of like, oh man, there's a real community here and everyone's just gonna go. I think it's also this, I don't know, I don't know how to explain it, but this like warm fuzzy feeling of human connection. I don't know them, I don't speak their language, but they've also shown their hospitality to me. So to me, it's like, yeah, that sense of getting nostalgic before it actually happens. It's like reflection and all of that. Yeah.
Guys? Well, I think that given how much Singapore has changed since independence, is that whatever that's left is a very precious echo of the past. So when we come across these buildings, these businesses, we know that they are there because they have survived through the odds, or some historical quirk, so that's why it fascinates us, it draws our attention, because if there were lots and lots of very old buildings scattered throughout the city, then we would not look at them twice. But when we come across a conserved building, a national monument, things like that, we stop and think for a while. Why is this building still here? Why is this business still here? Why hasn't it vanished into history? So I think that fascinates youths because because there's this we only know history from like books, from school and things like that, but when you come across history in real life, there's a certain fascination that I think that just encourages you to find out a little bit more about it. So, and I think that fascination is what's at play and most attractive to young people.
So, Dave, you run this podcast and you create content. Do you find it interesting that Singaporeans are interested in history? Or who's your main audience for your content? Do you know?
The main audience appears to be millennials, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any reason why you think that the millennials love history things?
I think it's because there's a growing realization that even the 90s is now part of history.
Yeah,
people like to
that's so
think people like to think that history kind of like stopped sometime in the 70s and 80s, but it's no longer the case. The 90s is almost 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I think I usually get two types of responses to my post. One is that they are much older people who can be in like the 40s, 50s and 60s. They see these clips and then they are like, I remember this from my childhood, or I was a student when this happened, things like that. So there's a certain sense of nostalgia because they're reliving their lived experience. Then the other type of response that I get is younger people like Gen Z and all that who are like, oh, I didn't know Singapore had this. I was like,
It's so bad. Okay.
or it's like, wow, I didn't know this place looked like this. Oh, I didn't know the bus looked like this. Or, I didn't know that this place that I walk past every day had this particular history to it.
Yeah.
So these are two different. So it's nostalgia and plus fascination at something completely new and unexpected. So it's a very interesting way to see these two types of comments, and then sometimes they interact with each other and they kind of share their own perspective of how they understand the history that they're seeing in the post.
Yeah, but I think Gen Z is really, not really, but they don't have a lot of those old things. Like a lot of stuff has gone and then they're living in this very shiny new world, right? So I feel like when I see them at like Peace Center or going through Golden Mile Complex, I'm like, oh, okay, this is it. But also I wonder if they do it for the gram, because it's now this cool hip place to actually, but do they actually like know about that?
I think that's like nostalgia is such an interesting concept because I think to a degree you can manufacture it or create that experience.
How so?
Social media, I think, almost perpetuates this. You get bite-sized information. People, browsing habits, I know I'm guilty of it. I skim the surface and we scan for what we want to see. And at the end of the day, sometimes do you actually go deep and understand the issues or the cultural context that the building was in, for example. So I think that to a degree, there's a heightened sense of nostalgia through social media, through programming when the building is going and everyone kind of gets in you. Everyone wants to be part of it. We want to connect and belong to something beyond us. And so this creates that moment and this buzz. Yeah,
I agree with what he said because the challenge when creating these history posts is that there's only very limited amount of time that you have to work with, because attention span on TikTok is really short. So if you're gonna open with like, here are 3 things to know about this space, and then there is
lost him, Robert. We lost him.
Let's go.
there is you have to think very quickly, what are the top 3 things that you're going to tell about this space, like if you're going to get any sort of like kind
audience
of a teaching moment,
Yeah.
that you're going to create any sort of teaching moments, like what is the maximum amount of facts that you can convey, so you leave a lot of things out. So are you really telling the full history of the place? Are you talking about the positive and the negatives about the space? History has many different perspectives and facets. But of course, in a simple social media post, you can't share everything. So
Yeah.
there is a limit, and definitely that means that you have to pick and choose. And so there is a limit to how much you can share the full story on social media. So I think folks who are viewing such material online should keep them in mind, that you've got to read up a little bit more, seek other sources and such. Yeah.
Okay. Going back to your project,
Yeah.
I just want to get into it a little bit because you did it because it was a project.
Yeah.
What did you get out of it personally? Grades aside or whatever
Okay.
it was. Like, what did you?
Also, guys, I got an A.
You can say it a bit louder. You did get A.
So what I like.
Yeah. So when you started, you were looking at it as a project. You were trying to do it for school.
Yes.
And did you get more out of it?
Yeah, so actually, in my experience of doing Golden Mile and covering it for, I think, about 6 months, honestly was a experience because a lot of people, when I started doing it and started posting about it, they were interested to see and know whether I had some sort of connection to Golden Mile or like whether I was doing it for some like really good sort of like purpose. But honestly, it really started off because I needed something to do for my FYP. But of course, I think the whole experience after that, being there so much, you inadvertently actually form so many genuine connections with the people there. So people have helped me, show me hospitality. There's always there's this place that I go in the basement to always eat and escape the crowds because sometimes it gets too much. So yeah, that there's this sense of it's almost like I feel like they've accepted me into their little bubble, and it's a bit special because most of them actually don't really speak good English, so we take a lot of time to understand each other and just sometimes share about very frivolous things. It doesn't have to be all about my article and investigating and whatever, right? So yeah, and I actually a testament to that is that I continued my coverage after I submitted my project, and I was still there, and I was there at the last day when they had their official last day.
What made you want to continue documenting them?
To be really honest, right, it's I think this goes completely there's no logic behind it, but I think it's a creative when you start something, you need to finish it,
To see it come full circle.
Yeah, full circle. You want to close it and you want to make sure that that it's complete, coming full circle. Because I feel like if I just did it for my project and then I stopped coverage, it would be such a waste, and I think I owe it almost to the people who gave me access into their lives to kind of see it through with them. Because on the last day, there were a lot of Siambus and stuff like that who recognized me, and then they hugged me, and then they were like, "Oh my God, you're here!" I was like, "Of course I'll be here," because they were taking off the four-faced Buddha at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the last day, and then there was a ceremony and everything organized by the Thai supermarket, I believe. But yeah, I think I wanted to see it through as well, just for personal reasons, because man, I was there, so and then
So you
just to
kind of
see it.
really grew attached to it, even though you didn't start out with any real
Yes,
connection
real
to it?
connection. Yeah. So by the end, of course, you're it's like when I go there, right? When I used to go there, it's like it's like always saying hi to everyone at the ground floor, say hello, and catching up with them almost. But yeah, there was a sense of community that I felt, so to complete it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't just want to talk about old buildings, because old businesses also get a lot of lamentations and love when there's news that they're going to close down, right? So I mean, we've all heard,
The magazine shop.
Dambi magazine shop,
Yeah.
and then there's another game shop in the area in Holland. I'm not calling it
A
game
cake
shop.
shop recently also was gonna.
Oh, Balmoral?
I think so.
It's
Yeah, the
supposedly
old school
closing.
cake shop also closing. Then
Yeah,
causing
and then people get really sad, and then they queue, and then they take pictures, and I want to ask, do you think sometimes the recognition for such spaces, be it a building or a business, can be a little belated or too late?
definitely.
John,
I think it's a very tough question, actually.
that's why I have
Yeah.
you to answer.
Because I think that when we talk about recognition, I would say what are we recognizing? Whom are we recognizing and for whom? Because for example, in the Tambi shop, magazine shop, yes, there was a lot of coverage. But if, let's say, he managed to sell off his business and someone else took over to run the magazine shop, there would there have been, is that okay? Or like the cake shop, if they just sold off their business, is that fine? And then you begin to wonder, is the value, maybe the landmark value of that shop, Tambi magazine shop in that corner, or or is it the actual business? Yeah. And then I think in understanding what we're trying to recognize, perhaps then you know whether or not it's belated or not. Perhaps there are some examples of belated recognition in the past, but I think as with the value system, we learn, and hopefully the lesson there is that we, if we recognize it's belated, then maybe you are more prepared for a future issue that you can address better in the future.
The fact that these businesses have survived this long itself tells a story, and I think, but of course, the reality is that the media's fascination with these stories tends to come because of some like it's going to close down, some issue with the shop, or the long time owners retiring and things like that. So that provides the hook that gets media attention around it, and that kind of like generates that social media kind of fascination with the business. So it's a tough call, like how do we ensure that we can protect these heritage businesses without needing to come to the final stages before we start to pay any attention to them. I have no real solution to offer for that.
I don't think there's a solution, but I think I'm interested to find out whether people will actually continue this outpouring of support. So I think with Tambi magazine, he's looking for a new space. I think he's just moving out of that iconic location. But with magazines, we know the print world is not exactly doing great, right? So if he's still continuing on, will people continue to support him even when he exists in another location? It's not the iconic location that we know him at, right? Or if this cake shop comes back up, but in a different location. I think food is a bit easier, but when you have businesses, I don't know whether people will continue because he now still exists.
Celebrate his new iteration of his business.
You must be saying people are showing the spot is for show only because it's gonna close, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And not really genuine love for the business, or actually. Yeah, is that what you're trying to get at? That it's not actually genuine in a way?
Well, I'm trying to find, among your peers, even with Peace Center, or when Golden Mile Complex comes back up as a new iteration, what will you see the building as? Or very hard to say, because even so, I earlier mentioned there was New Baru, right?
Yeah,
and it has gone through many iterations of what it was after being a high school. And I don't think it's on many young people's radar. It's so far out, you can't actually. I think you kind of have to walk a while to get in, right? Yeah. So in this new iteration, what would work for young people to?
Oh.
Yeah. Very hard to say because still early days.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in one example, it could be Chimes. It was a religious complex, and once it was deconsecrated and then it was repurposed, and it found a new a new breath of life as a sort of a lifestyle destination and such. I guess the new experience is really hard to predict, and then how how people would engage with the repurposed space. But we have seen the reinvention of many heritage spaces in Singapore. So I guess the challenge is, will the audience return?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my question. Do you think people will return to celebrate its heritage once again? Because now they're oh, okay, it's fine. Yeah, you know what I mean.
I think if there's an ability to create new experiences in the space, people will be willing to return, because there is the memory of what it used to be, and then there's also the ability to experience it now in its new form. So I think perhaps if you can show how these two can kind of come together, and I think that will continue to attract attention. Yeah, but but that curation has to be very carefully done, because if it's too drastically different or it affects the integrity of the space, then it may turn off people instead, because like they view the space as having been damaged in some way, and then they may not engage again. Yeah.
I think that this is where we need to have good designers. So people like professionals like architects or interior designers, place managers, and people who manage buildings or spaces, there needs to be an idea of recognizing the spirit of the place, and then as you go about to reiterate the new life of the building, you got to keep your eye on that point, that of the spirit of the place. And if you manage to do a good job in understanding the space, it will come out through maybe your iteration of the design, of how the space was used, and you can have good heritage interpretation. So heritage interpretation would be how you help the public understand the building on a different level. And a very basic way, maybe you have a storyboard to tell them, oh, this used to be, what
What it
room
was,
or what
yeah.
was. But that is just one level of interpretation. There's many others, textures, colors, this that can kind of come out and help the visitor or the public appreciate the space better. And then that perhaps builds connection over time.
Yeah, I think one example that I could cite would be the National Gallery Singapore.
Yeah,
it
where
has
they
two
have the-
separate lives,
Yeah.
past lives as the Supreme Court and as the City Hall. Now,
Yep.
we come after those two buildings closed down and then were repurposed into the National Gallery. It has a new purpose. People go there to view art, to learn about like the history of like Southeast Asian art and things like that. But if you look closely, scattered throughout the building, the echo of their past functions is still there. You can still visit like an old courtroom. You can still visit some detention cells and things like that. So the old history, the original purpose of the building is not lost. It is very cleanly and neatly integrated into the current purpose of the building, but it has been very carefully done. And like what he mentioned, things like bringing in architects, designers, and planners, to ensure that it's well integrated in a way that it's not jarring, doesn't minimize its past, but neither does it detract from the current purpose of the building. It's a very fine balance, but I think the National Gallery is one example that managed to get it done.
Okay, so I should be calm and not assume that people are doing it for the gram. They will appreciate
You
my
can do
heritage.
both.
Yeah,
You can do both. If you
Okay,
do a good
okay,
job,
like-
you'll have a good gram.
Yes. Okay, point taken. I will not believe that everyone does it for social media only.
But,
Okay.
but it definitely helps if the heritage space is a very good photo spot.
Yeah, because then that will bring people in.
Yeah.
And actually, this was going to be my question because, John, you did like outreach and education, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, what do you think it will take for young people to appreciate our heritage spaces, be it conserved buildings or older spaces or even heritage businesses? What can we do? What can everyone do really to get younger people interested? Because they are the next generation, right? So yeah.
I think that, like many things, if you want to get people interested, the first step is always about education and exposure. And in some ways, maybe like similar to the question you asked here, like what are his lived experiences? I mean, the younger generation don't have lived experiences, and you have to present these opportunities to them. So I think the first step is to really talk about it in have opportunities to talk about it, and from there you can build deeper connections. So it may be just an Instagram post initially, but perhaps when you go onto site and you can visit and take your photo there, then you have things that get you interested in this in the building or the place, and hopefully that can build deeper connections. And from there, you need to have opportunities for younger people to call to arms, something for them to do after that beyond just doing. I do think the younger generation are interested in learning more, I mean, as in evident from your
clearly
TikTok.
your TikToks
Yeah,
are
and doing
doing-
more, and you have to have, and because I think we all learn, we don't just learn through textbooks or listening, that you need to have different forms of and opportunities to learn as well.
I think, to be honest, with like, but I don't know. I feel like
read the news,
I got brain
then,
fart. No, I
and then
feel,
find out where it's.
no, because I feel like buildings, right? It's like, if the natural course of, like, let's say if New Baru becomes a hit place, which I think that's what the developers are trying to make it to be, right? And if young people actually go, then great. But I feel like if because of bad marketing, or like, the vendors are not really attractive, then people don't actually go, then it's just a natural thing whether people want to visit or not. You cannot force an experience, so to speak, in you should go to this place because it was this. I feel like, for example, why Peace Center and Golden Mile were so iconic is because it was a communal place where people actually had to pass through. Like, for example, Golden Mile. I mean, you also mentioned just now that you go there to take the bus to Malaysia, right? So I think those kind of things, it's like a natural place where people gather, and I don't think you can really manufacture that. Although you can make it attractive so that people will go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. TikTok challenge maybe. I'm just kidding. But
Yeah,
yeah.
you gotta start it, man.
Well, I mean, if you want to keep youths and basically anyone interested in heritage matters and all that, we need to stop thinking of history and heritage as just a collection of places, names, and dates to remember, because history tells stories, memories. And I think if we look at it in that way, it's more relatable to the average person. It's not something that only great people get to shape. Because the everyday, ordinary lived experiences of Singaporeans through the generations is also history.
Yeah.
And so, like heritage businesses, it was not only patronized by the elites, the everyday person also patronized these businesses. So I think if we make it clear to youths and other people that history is something that we can participate in directly and shape, then there would be not only interest in how we are shaping history now, but there's also an interest in how in the past that we are viewing from our perspective. Like there's be a greater interest in preserving that past, understanding the past, seeing how it has evolved as well. So I think creating a better understanding that we have a direct role in shaping history would go a long way in ensuring that the interest in heritage and history is sustained.
I do love that idea, but I'm also maybe a bit like jaded.
Why? What's up? Tell
That's a
us.
great philosophy and great idea that we are doing this because we know we have a duty to protect or to learn about the history. But let's face it, not everyone always cares, or you'd be preaching to the choir. Like we want to get more people involved and more interested in issues beyond what they normally care for, perhaps. And I think that would be important. And sometimes maybe we do need the Instagram spots and the cafes to just bring them in first, and then from there,
I mean, I
some
agree. I mean, if
programming.
there's some slick marketing to help the process along, why not?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Actually, if I can add to this, right, I think the one reason why that, or like what I've observed in my own experience, is that when I started posting about stories, right, because I took a bit more of a journalistic approach. So there was a lot of research that went into it. I had a translator with me. So it really went in depth with, let's say, people or like shop owners who were leaving, and I was trying to get their story. I think through that kind of storytelling, people knew a bit more, because I think Golden Mile felt very foreign. It's like, as a Singaporean, I just feel like, this is for Thai people. Like, I don't really go there. It's for people who visit the Siam Tus or whatever. But then I think when you actually go into the individual stories and you realize, hey, these are real people who have built up like real lives there, and they emigrated from Thailand. And I always have to remind people, I think when I talk and mention Golden Mile, they always have something a bit negative to say, but I also remind them that, like, hey, all of us were also from somewhere else. majority of us are from other countries, and our grandfathers, great grandfathers came from, you know, across the seas to Singapore, so they are also doing the same, you know. So it's I think that kind of I don't know whether you want to call it the more human touch. So I think once they realize that, like, oh, there's, you know, certain things that they can relate to and feel, then
They'll come and appreciate.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I had some thoughts about that. I don't know if it's because it's dinner time or what, okay? But yeah, but I think we're all very basic creatures. So you need to have something to relate to, exactly
Yeah.
like what you said. And to me, actually, what connected me with the Golden Mile was the sweet potato fritters.
at the Thai supermarket.
yeah, the Thai supermarket. I mean, that was like the best. And
Yeah,
then
the
with
Padang fritters as well. Sorry.
with
Shout out.
Tanjung Pagar railway station, when you're talking just now, I thought about the Bergedale, which was like as big as your fist.
Yeah.
You know,
To get John out, you need to tempt him with the food.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, when the station was going to be closed, a lot of people flocked there to eat the food.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because to them the station represented very good makan.
I did not notice.
Oh,
Obviously,
yeah.
I was
you're too young.
I'm like, wait, they sold food there.
Even if you were not interested in the trains, the station had good food.
Yeah.
To me, it's like a place to hide, you know. Not really like a real place.
Different life. Okay.
Yes. Well, thank you guys very much for that thoughtful conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I'm going to ask you guys, if you like something about this episode, tell me in the comments section. And if you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes of The Usual Place, you can like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell down below. If you want to hear the audio version of this episode, you can follow me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on the ST app. I'm also on Instagram, to connect with me at theusualplace_net, and I promise to reply if you have any comments. I'll see you again in the next episode. See you!